They're still talking about ethics at the Statehouse, and parking will cost more in the new year. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. Hope everybody had a nice Thanksgiving. Now that we are back to normal eating, I'm here with Jerry Nowicki is back. He is Statehouse reporter for Capitol News, Illinois. Welcome back.
Thanks, Bernie.
And Dave Dahl is back of WTAX Radio here in Springfield.
Yeah, normal everything.
Welcome
back.
That sounds good. We are back. Ethics continues to be a hot issue in the state of Illinois. It is in the spotlight. The governor signed some legislation this week involving ethics, and some legislators on the Republican side appeared at the Statehouse in the last few days asking for a special session. Jerry, they're going to get a special session before a commission reports in the spring?
No, it certainly doesn't sound like it. In fact, the governor at a press conference yesterday for an unrelated event said it doesn't make a lot of sense to look at all these ethics issues in such a quickie special session, as he referred to it, or even the quickie veto session, as he referred to it. He said you need more time to think about it. Of course, the opposite argument is, we've needed ethics reform for decades, and a commission's just going to push it until after the March primaries.
Now, on top of that, Jerry, in a relatively short amount of time, there's been hit after hit after hit on guys getting indicted, guys getting investigated,
right.
And people closer and closer, not necessarily elected people, but people close to the speaker getting, their houses tossed or whatever.
Right.
It's unusual even by Illinois standards. But that said, when was the last special session that accomplished anything?
It's been a long time since there were special sessions, and mostly they get, in the Blagojevich era, he wanted to make a point that the legislature should do what he wanted, and this is, of course, more than a decade ago, but he kept calling special sessions, and then the speaker, if you don't have agreement, it's difficult just to call people in, because Madigan would have somebody, the Speaker of the House, would have a couple of people gavel out and say, we're done for the day.
It took Gary Hannig longer to drive up from Montgomery
Litchfield,
County than it did to actually have the session.
Well, let's talk about the five Republican lawmakers who had the press conference saying, let's have a special session, were Blaine Wilhauer, Alan Skillicorn, Brad Halbrook, Chris Miller, and Dan Calkins. Republicans are in a very severe minority, so obviously you can say they really care, and I'm sure they do really care, but given the reality of the situation that Democrats hold an extraordinary majority in the House, what do they get out of this besides more publicity and looking towards the next election or towards the spring?
There's certainly, having your name in the press is good when you're a politician, but it's also, you kind of got to keep this at the forefront. If you stop mentioning ethics, if you stop talking about it, people will forget. I mean, maybe not forget as long as these indictments keep rolling in and all these federal search warrants, but keeping it at the forefront is an effort to try to get something done.
One thing I find interesting is that, yes, House Republicans have a problem too, and I think the gentleman this past week accurately said, when the House Republicans have a problem, they take care of it. They've had a couple of guys resign, and they haven't lingered or anything like that. There was Nick Sauer,
right, who
had a sexting scandal.
Yeah, put some negative, some bad pictures of an old girlfriend or something online, and is facing allegations about that.
So you could argue that the way Leader Durkin has run that kind of thing versus the way the Speaker has run the same kind of thing, and the way President Cullerton has run the same kind of thing, maybe stands out.
Well, Martin Sandoval is the state senator that we all came to pay more attention to a couple months ago when federal agents raided his office at the Statehouse, as well as his home and his office in the suburbs. It was either Cicero or Berwyn. He has announced his resignation come January 1st. Tom Cullerton is a distant cousin of the President Cullerton in the Senate, and he has been indicted and has said he is innocent of having a little or no work job with a union, the Teamsters Union, while being a senator, and he's defending himself but remains in the Senate. And we also had a resignation from the House
Luis
Luis Arroyo,
Who was actually indicted.
who was indicted,
Was in
right-
court rather than chamber.
Arrested,
yes, and,
yeah.
it was, and everybody found that out when he appeared in court the first day of the veto session. And he is a Democrat in the House. So there are these ongoing issues. Now, the governor also, in his press conference, he actually, or something he did this week, he signed legislation strengthening some lobbyist rules.
Yeah,
Terry?
I think that just kind of, if you're a lobbyist, a subcontractor for a different lobbyist, you could kind of hide what you're lobbying for, but that kind of gets rid of that. But when it came up for a vote, it was a far more stringent law with more requirements for lawmaker economic interests. They'd have to provide more information on what they're making money from, but that aspect of the bill was removed late in the veto session, which of course the Republicans who called the press conference yesterday said, why would you remove that, especially considering the climate now? You're just watering down any of the ethics bills.
Right.
The other thing he signed was a commission to study ethics, conveniently scheduled to report those findings after the March primaries.
Right.
So Republicans took issue with that too.
Right.
I think if you're okay with watering down the bill as it pertains to lobbying, you're probably also okay with a revolving door.
Meaning,
You walk out of the chamber on Monday and you walk back into the Capitol on Tuesday as a lobbyist.
well, there certainly will be pressure to do something on revolving door, perhaps, even though it's been very common over the years. Legislators leave and then you see them in the hallways shortly thereafter, working on issues. They are knowledgeable, but you might argue that, certainly some people argue they shouldn't be doing this for a year or two.
In fact, just Thursday afternoon of this week, Capitol Facts in the afternoon reported that former Representative Steve Anderson was appointed to some board or whatever.
He was appointed
that
to the
commission,
Ethics
yeah.
Commission,
And
actually.
now it turns out he was a lobbyist as recently as this summer. So see ya.
So yes, so the governor withdrew the appointment. So there you go. And also Juliana Stratton, the lieutenant governor, is another governor appointment to that. Interestingly, each of the legislative leaders gets to appoint 2 people to that, and this generated some controversy among Republicans in the Senate. Mark Maxwell, WCIA-TV, Channel 3, Champaign, but he's based in Springfield, broke the story, but some of us followed up on it. State Senator Jason Plummer of Edwardsville, who was actually the lieutenant governor candidate on the ticket with Bill Brady in 2010. They lost to Pat Quinn. But Bill Brady is Republican leader of the Senate. He initially named Jason Plummer as one of the 2 people to that commission, but then Plummer claims that Brady wanted him to not introduce his own bill that would ban legislators from being involved directly in the gaming industry. And Brady, a story from ProPublica and WBEZ Radio in Chicago, it was reported some months ago, actually gets a commission apparently for getting video gaming machines in businesses in the Bloomington area.
Well, one fact that I think is interesting, if not delicious, is that Brady and Plummer were together on that ticket as one of the last examples, if not the last, of the 2 candidates not being yoked. You
Right.
actually run for lieutenant governor, and the person running for governor in the primary would be matched up. So they
Right.
were, they were bedmates not by choice.
Right, and Jason Plummer, whose family owns RP Lumber Outlets, 69 locations in 2 states.
And a piece of
He
Dodgers,
spent, I
and
believe, the
Buckets.
most of several candidates, including Springfield's Don Tracy in that lieutenant governor race, and became the candidate, and was then paired with Brady. And now, partly because the Democrats, both parties got lieutenant governor candidates, not necessarily Plummer, but they didn't want later, and they changed the law to say they run as a ticket now. Anyway,
Yeah,
Go ahead,
Governor
Jerry.
Quinn, that's how he became governor. He was
that's right. He and Blagojevich hated each other, and he was Blagojevich's lieutenant governor when Blagojevich was impeached and removed.
And
Impeached? That's an interesting word these days. Anyway.
Should point out Senator Plummer was rumored to be up for the Shimkus seat, but he ended up not filing for that. Is that correct?
Correct. It was unknown. It was thought that he might be one of the Republican candidates who would want to run in the 15th congressional district in South and Eastern Illinois. He decided, apparently it was on November 25th, or by then, not to run, and then called Brady, who was telling, and there was communication involved. Well, now he could be on the commission because he's not running for Congress, but there was clearly a miscommunication because Plummer says Brady told him, you can't introduce your own bills, you only have to introduce bills for that represent the whole caucus, because you'll be representing the Republicans in the Senate if you're there. And Plummer thought that that was kind of a gag rule, and Brady denies that, says he didn't discuss any particular legislation with Plummer. So there was this interesting disagreement. They exchanged letters. Brady said, well, he's resigned, I accept his resignation. Plummer said, well, I never accepted the appointment from Brady, so figure it out.
Well,
but it's an interesting clash, and now Plummer says he has introduced legislation along these lines to keep legislators out of the gambling business.
There's a lot to unpack there, and when you're in hometown city, your favorite lawmaker, is going to go get them and go to Springfield, and that favorite lawmaker might be in their first or second term and maybe in the minority party, but by golly, they're going to go get them, and they come down here, and what turns out essentially is your boss isn't your people, your boss is Bill Brady or Mike Madigan or whomever, and to some extent that's true, but it's totally upside down from the story that they feed to the reporters in hometown city. And another thing, with regard to the initial story by Channel 3's Mark Maxwell, the lead, at least, of what Rich Miller excerpted was that it shows that Brady's hold on his caucus may be fraying, to which I would say, what about Christine Rodonio? She had an open revolt by 6 of her members, and 6 was a pretty good chunk of that micro-caucus.
Yeah, well, I think I have not talked to a lot of people about this, but it would be rather extraordinary for anything to be breaking apart. I mean, certainly Brady is in office as the leader until like 2021, so there's no imminent change of leadership on the Republican side in the Senate, even though Senate President John Cullerton on the Democratic side has announced that he is resigning in January, and I believe it's January 19th, the Democratic caucus is supposed to be meeting, and we've got a couple of leading contenders, Don Harmon from Oak Park and
Lightford, and
Kimberly Lightford, state senator, and from Maywood, both western suburbs. So we will see kind of where that ends up. Speaking of ethics, it's almost like that. The name Elena Hampton has been in the news in the last week. She is the woman who was formerly a campaign worker in the organization of House Speaker Michael Madigan. She claimed that she was the subject of sexual harassment to somebody on staff who kept asking her out when she made it very clear she didn't want to go out.
And there were a lot of text messages.
And there were text messages that all came out. And she kind of helped bring the whole Me Too movement to Springfield a couple years ago. And she has gotten a $275,000 settlement from Madigan's political funds. Apparently $75,000 goes to her. $200,000 goes to the various lawyers that worked with her, I believe. She is also working. I saw one story for E Street Group, a Democratic consultant company, I think in Chicago, that works with nonprofits and other clients. So kind of the end of that phase of things, but she also is, getting, continues to be a voice for people to fight that kind of harassment in the political arena.
Yeah, she has found a voice in all this. I think a chunk of that settlement may go to the Me Too Legal Defense Fund too.
Okay.
And she stuck to her guns. She knew her rights. She challenged it, and she kind of a David and Goliath type.
Taking on the Madigan organization
right.
in Illinois is not an easy thing, and she, once in a while
and
tweets
she found
about
work
the various pressures.
afterward too, which 10 years ago maybe she wouldn't have been able to do that. It's really an interesting case.
A couple noteworthy things there. Marty Quinn, the operative, if you will, who was involved in this Hampton case, plus Tim Mapes, chief of staff to Madigan, who also lost his job as part of the Me Too, have had relatively soft landings, either because of business that's come their way or gifts. And in Quinn's case, Madigan's people say, Speaker doesn't get involved in that.
Right, yeah, and Kevin Quinn, it's been reported many times in certainly the Chicago papers, he got like $31,000 sent to him from other lobbyists, and Speaker Madigan, spokesman says that the speaker or spokesperson said that he had nothing to do with this or no knowledge of it. But it has also come out, I believe, of Chicago Tribune reporting that Mike McLean, a former state legislator from Quincy, a good friend of Madigan, his house was also raided, but we don't know why. He's been a lobbyist for entities including Commonwealth Edison. He had sent out a note to other lobbyists saying, let's help Kevin, and various $1,000 either payments or contracts.
Yeah, put it in
went
writing.
to him.
Real smart there.
And we don't know where all this leads. I mean, the Chicago Tribune also reported late in the week that they talked to some people being talked to by investigators, and the investigators are asking about Mike Madigan's involvement in things, and perhaps Commonwealth Edison. Again, no charges there, but that's where smoke is starting. There's some smoke around.
Well, one way to look at it, and they tell you when you're on jury duty, even if you don't have 100 paces, if you're pretty sure it's an elephant, go ahead and vote that way. And I'm not necessarily saying that, well, I guess it'd be a donkey in this case because they're Democrats, but nevertheless, you could believe that the way they're building the case, Mike McLean is the dot between Madigan and everybody else.
And we know at some point, apparently, some telephone conversations might have been recorded by somebody, but we were not sure where all of that is.
Right.
And so, I always feel odd tossing around some of these names. The people we're talking about have not been charged with anything, but clearly there's investigation going on.
Yeah, they seem to be zeroing in on someone. All we can do is kind of wait to see where the feds go next.
Sandoval has not been charged either.
That's true. He's finally announced his resignation from the legislature coming in January, and so we'll see where that goes. Let's talk about something that does affect people all over the state, because we always say at the beginning of the show, how it might affect your life. Well, parking rates. Jerry, you know about this too.
That's right.
This is part of the funding mechanism for the capital plan that passed last year.
Right. I think it's 6% tax on daily parking and 9% tax on monthly parking. My parking rate at the garage I park at in Springfield is going up 11%, so I think they're using that as an opportunity.
Maybe there's just a little inflation.
Maybe a little bit of inflation, but I mean, yeah, it's something you notice on your monthly bills as you're.
Right, and now one of the odd situations here, this of course, the gasoline tax was doubled, as many people know, because a lot of people talk about it, from 19 cents to 38 cents. And then I think it will rise with indexed in the future. And that will pay for roads. There's this lockbox that constitutional amendment, the gasoline tax has to go to road and bridge construction, that kind of thing. But a big part of the capital plan is also what they call vertical, which is buildings, fixing buildings at the state fair, fixing buildings on campuses across the state facilities. And one of the funding sources for that is this parking tax. What is interesting and has come out is that the rules that were then generated for the parking tax to implement it by the State Department of Revenue have included that if you are, for example, near the state fair in Springfield and you're one of the homeowners or lot owners that parks cars there during the state fair, if you park more than 3 cars, you are considered an official tax agent and you have to file paperwork, report to the state, and pay tax. Dave, is that going to be... we know that State Representative Tim Butler says who lives very near to the fairgrounds and represents the area, doesn't like this and says he's going to try to get that fixed legislatively or otherwise.
It doesn't sound like a bad idea. I mean, it's the fair is those neighbors' one shot to do anything, and it's far from a sophisticated operation, nor should it be a sophisticated operation. So. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that unintended consequence gets massaged out. Isn't that what it's all about? I mean, it sounds like a good idea to say, oh, everybody's going to do this, and then you find some of these other things bubble up.
Yeah, well, and I think when they talk about a parking tax, I mean, there's so many taxes on garages in Chicago, and the city ups it now and then. But downstate is going to get hit with this also, which is just a little bit different than people are used to.
State fair is only a week and a half.
Yeah, with the state fair. The question is, I think somebody posted on Twitter or the Capitol Facts blog, it might cost more to actually enforce that than it does the money you gain from that. I don't know how many properties do that in Springfield. There's quite a bit, as you see.
Yeah, well, it's quite a cottage industry in season. It is. So filing for the March 17th primary finished up within the last week. There are some interesting races. We found out, for example, take one Central Illinois State Representative Avery Bourne from south of Springfield in I think it's the 95th district. There's a Republican named Lawrence Oliver who says she's not conservative enough because she voted for the gas tax increase for the road construction program. So he's taking her on, and then there's a Democratic person who's in the military, I think in the reserves, named Chase Wilhelm of Coffeen, and he's running. That's just one example of the races coming, and I guess most state representatives, many of them come away without opposition in the primary, but we don't exactly know in the age of Trump nationally and Trump popular downstate Illinois and not so popular in northern Illinois where elections go in 2020.
Yeah, in the midterms 2018, part of the reasoning for some of these candidates running is you kind of build a boat, see if the blue wave takes you where it wouldn't have previously. So Trump polarizes the electorate, certainly, but the impeachment's a big thing now, as you know. That's kind of...
Let's talk about that, because we can discuss the 13th Congressional District, which includes part of Springfield. It includes Champaign and goes into Bloomington. And it even goes south to near St. Louis. Rodney Davis is the Republican incumbent. He's the one who, before 2016, said he couldn't vote for Donald Trump, but now he says impeachment is terrible and Nancy Pelosi is terrible and we must protect the president, or at least forget impeachment and move on with real business. Democrat Betsy Dirksen-Londrigan from Springfield came within 1 point of Davis in 2018, is running again, but she also has a primary opponent named Stephanie Smith of Urbana, who is not a traditional candidate. She, I guess she formerly used to work, she says, as a sex worker, and says that years and years ago, and says that she represents people in a lower part of the economy who are unrepresented and need better representation.
Yeah,
so that'll be a Democratic primary.
I think if you are an honorary co-chair of the Trump campaign in Illinois,
Which Rodney Davis
which would
now
be
is.
all of the Republican congressmen except
Adam
Kinzinger and Shimkus, who's now on his way
Right,
out.
Right.
You know, I think you got to say you're all in, and whether that is going to be a problem for Congressman Davis, you know, who knows? It's a tough district with a lot of college towns, hint, hint, liberal, and so I think, well, that district's, I mean, everything's going to be remapped, but as long as the 13th district is the way it is, you know, it's going to be a tough one for Congressman Davis each time. He's won each time, so we'll see. But I would say Rodney isn't going to be running away from Trump.
Certainly is not at this point.
Not
Well,
now.
he's already got TV ads to the effect that he's basically
Well, from an
aligning
outside
himself with
group.
Trump.
An outside group is backing
Yeah,
him.
or somebody
and
on
I know
his
that
behalf.
there's it's a group that has spent some millions of dollars in this district and other districts across the country before.
Right.
There have also been ads for telling Rodney Davis to hold the president accountable by a veterans group, which is for impeachment, because they didn't like the way veterans were treated when they were
Right.
testifying. And then you've got this other group, and I believe pharmaceutical companies are among the funders, or it has been reported,
And when I'm watching
that are
football-
saying, call Rodney Davis and thank him for trying to do good things about like medical costs and infrastructure and the needs of the country, and get off of this impeachment thing because it's a hoax. And they show, of course, you know, the very liberal Democrats talking about it in that ad. The campaigns aren't spending the money yet, at least on TV, but these outside groups have done so.
Yeah, he seems earlier, or these ads seem on earlier than they were a couple years ago against Dirksen-Londrigan. And she doesn't have anything up that I've seen at this point either, other than
That outside group
the
that was
outside
attacking
groups, yeah.
Rodney for not holding the president accountable is what they want. So Dave, I don't know if you're the right person to ask this, but the group called the Satanic Temple of Chicago once again has a display in the rotunda called "Knowledge is the Greatest Gift." It is the arm of Eve with a snake around it holding an apple.
Black apple.
And it's near the nativity scene. It's near a menorah is back now. There's another statement from a group called Freedom from Religion Foundation, which says religion, isn't the greatest thing in the world. I guess nothing this year is new when this satanic arm was there last year.
Nothing new yet.
It caused quite a stir. But are we seeing any stir, those who hang around the Statehouse?
Well, I haven't, but it's early. How many days till the season?
It's been quiet in the Statehouse, but the Secretary of State has a sign there too saying you get 30 days to have your thing up here in compliance with the First Amendment, of course, of the U.S. Constitution. And he seems to be enforcing that fairly consistently.
He gets along with it, and the fact that Jesse White gets goodwill from people probably helps in this process. That Satanic Temple group, by the way, I talked to them a year ago when the story first came out, when it first appeared, and they claim they don't believe in Satan, they just are kind of making fun of organized religion is what they're trying to do. They say knowledge and rationality over superstition, ignorance, and dogma is what the group advocates even on its website.
Non-theist.
Yeah, so,
that's the first time I've heard
but
that
people
word.
do get exorcised over these things.
With a flair for the dramatic.
Exercised or exorcised.
Yes, well, with that, we're going to have to let it go for today. Jerry Nowicki and Dave Dahl, thanks for your conversation. I'm Bernie Schoenburg. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.